View from the Gutters, episode 78. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss Bryan Lee O'Malley's Seconds, and, to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip to 11241.
We are
the show on the road.
Welcome to View from the Gutters, episode 77.
No.
It's episode 78.
Episode 79.
Try again. Start
Welcome
over.
to View from the Gutters, episode Fuck You, Toby.
No, start over.
I will gladly accept your opprobrium for knowing what episode it is.
Do over. Do over.
Yeah, I'm Major Chard.
I'm Joe Preddy.
I'm Tobiah Panchin.
I'm Brant Gillahan Eddy.
And I'm Kate Reynolds.
Yay. We're all back.
Yeah.
Are you...
Yeah.
What?
I took a nap today, so I'm like weirdly tired.
You know what one of my biggest fears is? Random fact. Is that I'm going to pronounce my name wrong one of these days on the show.
I'm Kate Reynolds.
Wait,
no, fuck, start again. Do over.
And I'm Kade
No,
Reynolds.
Kade. Kade.
It's going on the website. Cade Reynolds.
Kade Reynolds.
Yeah. We're off to a great fucking start here. What are we talking about? Oh, so Seconds.
Yes.
And Toby, you pitched this one.
Yes, I did.
Good, I remembered. And
Good job.
I remembered a thing. Yay! What did you think about it? Rereading it?
It was
I didn't
fucking
reread
awful.
it.
Did you not reread it?
No, I literally, I finished reading it right before we went and recorded the last episode, so I was like, I already read that. Like, I don't need to read it again, but, I mean, I still remember what happened.
You remember what happened in a book you read a week ago?
Yes, I know.
Wow.
Isn't that magical?
Even
It
more
is for
impressive is we are doing a side project on the, and so he read 4 issues of that, and then
Wow, Joe.
I don't think we've announced that yet.
No, we didn't. We've been teasing it
Okay,
for
we've
weeks,
been
and you
teasing
just
it.
completely
know
fucked
what?
that up.
No,
edit it out.
It
Just
will be
edit
edited
the whole
out.
fucking thing
It'll
out.
be
It'll just
edited
be one
out.
long beep.
Should we just start again?
No, we're good.
No, let's keep going.
Let's make more work for me.
Joe and I
Okay,
are
since-
working on a secret,
A secret,
undisclosed side
undisclosed-
project that will be announced very
With
soon.
Edgar Winters. And
not with
it's
Edgar
gonna be
Winters.
amazing.
It is.
It's going to be Prague.
way.
It's going to be a Prague cast, not a podcast. It's
Oh,
gonna be
great.
A Prague cast.
Is it going to include allegations of inappropriate contact with youthful people?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Yes.
Are there
wait.
hobbits involved?
Who's the guy from
Chris Hansen.
Chris Hansen is going to be here. He's going to be asking people to take
Dateline.
a seat over there. We got Phil Spector doing the audio.
So,
He's gonna
yeah.
sit
I
in.
know that Dateline is like a very serious. I mean, like Dateline to Catch a Predator. It's like a serious thing, and it's a good service that they provide. But I love the 30 Rock joke about To Catch a Predator when Dennis is on To Catch a Predator. So it's so good.
Wait, so
Liz-
there isn't a 16-year-old girl here?
Yeah. So creepy. Liz's
30 Rock
ex-boyfriend. I love that
is
show.
fucking
Anyway,
incredible anyways.
that's what Dateline makes me think
But
of, is 30 Rock.
The point that you were trying to make is that at least 2 of you have read that book in like the last 3 hours.
I read it in
Yeah.
an hour.
Yeah, I
3
read it
hours
right
ago.
before we started because, as we all know, my memory is garbage.
I don't
And I
even know
have to
what,
read it
I
right
don't even
before.
know what we're talking about today.
I
Well,
actually,
you certainly don't know what episode it is.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
I actually ended up reading it the same day Toby did because I read it right after the podcast.
And
Whoa.
at least a couple of our listeners let us know that they had ordered it like right before the episode went out, announcing that we were going to talk about it.
Yeah.
So good on them.
And good on us for being on the pulse
And
of what's happening in comics.
Johnny on the spot.
As usual, we're right there with the facts and news
We are
you
right
wanted. No?
technology,
Anyway.
industry, science, working for you on View from the Gutters.
If only.
Yeah,
Toby.
I really liked this book. I mean, I liked Bryan Lee O'Malley's previous work, Scott Pilgrim, and if anything, I think he's stepped up his game since then. And I think that he is utilizing a lot of the lessons that he learned on Scott Pilgrim in this book.
I think it's interesting that you think he stepped up his game only because the writing is so similar. The biggest difference is the content of like what the story is about. So
Well,
the story is as equally fantastical as Scott Pilgrim, which was where we get the term, like, when a plot Scott Pilgrims you out of nowhere, right? Like, you read the whole first volume of that book and nothing weird happens. And then all of a sudden, right at the end, like, you take a Scott Pilgrim left turn, and it's like, what the fuck is happening with this book now?
I have never heard that before.
Really?
Yeah,
People
me
say
neither.
that. People say that.
No,
I
don't
promise
think
you,
so.
people say
I also
that.
never heard it.
People
I'm
say
on
it.
the internet.
People
Come on,
say it.
Help him out, Cade.
People named Andrew Chard say it.
Well, yeah.
Fair.
There you go.
That's the only person that matters
I
in the
don't
world.
even think the subject matter is that different. I mean, like, I enjoyed Seconds, but I think this is, like Scott Pilgrim, this is a story about growing up.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, yeah, certainly. I mean, he's working off of the same notebook, let's say. But I think that he tells the story in a much more efficient way. That with Scott Pilgrim, he seems to kind of like go back and forth sometimes and maybe not know exactly what he wants to do. And it's not always the clearest or most efficient story. And in this, he gets in and he tells an awesome story and he gets out in one volume and it all hangs together really well. And everything feels like it really has a purpose.
Maybe. I like this book. I like this book a lot. But I feel like this is infinitely more meandering than Scott Pilgrim, only because it is like a rewriting of itself over and over again. So it's not meandering for no reason, like, but it is very introspective in the fact that it's like, okay, these events happened and now we're going to go back and change that, and like, what are the results of that? And so you're treading over a lot of common ground over and over again, where every time that she awakes from the reality, you have this moment where the book has to like catch you back up to what's going on.
Yeah, but all of that is really important because
No, I
you're
agree.
seeing the effects that every choice that she made had on her life.
Right.
And how she is who she is. And her choices came from the choices that she made because she is who she is.
Right.
And by changing her choices, she was changing her identity so that by the end of the book, she was living a life that had nothing to do with who she was, and
Right.
that made her unhappy.
Yeah.
And
But I don't think that has
I agree
anything
with-
to do with the format of how the story is being told.
I'm not saying that it's not meandering, because it is, but I think that there's a difference between saying that it's meandering and saying that it's inefficient. Like, I think all of those meanderings are important to the story that he's telling. And I agree with Joe that it is about growing up, but more so I think it's about living with the choices that you made and not being held back by your regrets. And saying, like, yeah, I made that choice, and maybe it wasn't the best one, but it's the choice that I made. I can't go back and change it, but
Right.
I can find a new way forward that leads me towards a better, truer self.
I don't want to. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking this whole time, but I agree with you only in that, like, that is the nature of that exact storytelling, like, narrative, where it's like, what if you had the power to change the past? Like, that's what that story is about. Is like, but you can't. Like, that's always the moral of that story. Like, there is no other moral to that story. It's not like suddenly like, oh, I have the power to change the past, I'm going to go back and make sure that I have a dragon and a polar bear with machine guns to ride. To like, you can't do anything with your life other than like make a different choice. And there's many writings about the fact that, like, given the same information that you had at the time, not information that you gained post that decision, but if you had the same decision to make again with the same information that you had, you would make the same decision again because it's the decision you made. Like, you as a person cannot choose to make a different decision. And whether that's true or not, like, that's a philosophical argument, but I think it's something that is, it like absolutely flies in the face of stuff like this, because this is all about like, oh, well, now I have all this knowledge like past the event happening that I will go ahead and like undo these choices, but those choices were so inherently myself that you're right, like, you're undoing yourself. But the mechanics of the story is what feels meandering to me, because and it's not wasted space, and it's not meandering in the fact that he doesn't know what he's doing, but it meanders as far, and maybe meander isn't the right word, but it feels like it has this, like the tape has to spin back up again at the beginning of the story.
What you're
you know what I'm saying?
And I feel like you are. We're both saying yes, this is what the story does, and you're saying this is a bad thing, and I'm saying no, I think it's a good thing, and that's just a difference of opinion.
Yeah, no, I think the mechanics of it are very like reminiscent of similar stories to what we've seen before.
That's fair,
and
I like it when a story is sort of ponderous, that it kind of takes its time and thinks about things, and you go through it slowly and you repeat motifs. Like that can be done really well, and I think that O'Malley does it well in this story.
I think he does it well in Scott Pilgrim too, because I feel like that book is even more ponderous because it's longer.
Well, it is quite a bit longer.
And
I feel like he's more ponderous.
well, I mean, it takes whatever, Sassmaster. No, it takes more time in that book because I agree with Toby that in that one he does wander.
Well, and I think that the difference is that I think Scott Pilgrim is as long as it needs to be, and I think this is as long as it needed to be. One is Scott Pilgrim learns to make choices that will benefit him, and Katie learns that that the choices you make, and this is a sentiment I agree with completely as somebody who's made some pretty unpopular decisions in my own life.
Boy, have you.
Yeah. Right.
Jesus.
I'm surprised you have any
choosing
friends
to be
left.
on this fucking podcast every goddamn week for the last
best
3
decision you've
fucking
ever made.
But that your decisions are what make you who you are, because you don't always get to make the right decision. Sometimes you make the shitty decision, and you, in dealing with the adversity that follows, you become a more well-rounded person. You learn how to deal with adversity. You learn how to walk through the shittiness, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think they're both ponderous in their own way. I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing in either one of them.
No.
I think that I really want to hear what Brant has to say about this.
Brant's making faces at us.
He's making faces at everything Toby said, and that's just going to be fun for me.
It's extra special fun because I'm sitting right next to
you
Brant.
guys are basically touching right now.
So now you guys argue, so I'm going to argue with Brant. Go!
It occurs to me that I don't think I've been on an episode of the podcast where the group didn't like the book. I don't think
not on one that you've been on.
Not on one that I've been on. Even though I've been on the show relatively consistently lately, I still haven't managed to land. We've had minor conversations about things we didn't like as much, but I don't think there's been a time where one person's been like, I like this book, and another person's been like, I don't. And that's why I wish I would have not missed the comic or the Rocket Girl one, because I didn't like that book.
Right.
And I don't like this one at the end of the day. Now, there's some things that I have to say to preface this. I have very broad art tastes, but that does mean that when I find something I don't like, it's pretty much it's a big deal killer for me. I found myself actually appreciating O'Malley's art a little bit more by the time I was done, but I was loath to read this book because I don't like his art. I also don't like the cult of Scott Pilgrim. That seems very, very ingrained into having to approach that book in any kind of popular way. And I never had really heard of it. And by the time it hit my radar, there were so many weird people that are like, this is such a deep metaphor for what it's like to grow up, and there's video game references. I was like, I don't give a shit. I'm not going to read this fucking book. And I'm still not. I did like the movie, though.
The movie is not even as good as the book.
It's so I've heard.
Maybe a third is good.
Brant, you should read the book.
I probably should, but I do find his art off-putting. I do find the...
Yeah, that's fair.
So there's something that I didn't like about Rocket Girl, and maybe my mind was already mired in this particular thing that I was just kind of like eye roll that really caught me about seconds, which is this kind of overt need to talk about age in a way that's almost blatantly immature. As somebody now who is in his early 30s, I'm like, I still pretty sure I've got at least 2/3 of my life left, God willing, whatever. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to live. Like, I don't feel like I'm old. And the fact that this is about a person who's in their mid to late 20s having like this existential crisis about being quote unquote old. I'm just like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Like, but at the same time, I understand being in your 20s and being like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I still have that phenomenon. I think that's important to talk about. But I have this phrase that's coming to mind about this book. This feels like to me a second-rate version of the butterfly effect told to me by somebody who thinks I'm 8.
Yeah.
The way that O'Malley structures his story, the way that he structures, in particular, his narration. I feel like this is being over-explained to me. I feel like I'm being coddled, and I feel like that he loses half of the amazing momentum he could have built with his artistic vision had he not chosen to, like... I feel like knowing what barest things I know about Scott Pilgrim, what I feel like we're just like, these are my O'Malley signature touches from Scott Pilgrim. Here's the character. Here's their name and age. Ding!
Yeah.
Here's a insightful and witty narration that the character's going to break the fourth wall and talk to you about at the very beginning and the end of the book, even though there's nothing substantially different about it. And it's meant to feel cute, but it feels strangely cute in reference to everything else and the gravitas that story is supposed to have. Like, ultimately, for me, I did find it meandering both in concept and execution. I know why he chose to do those things. I just didn't think they were done well.
Yeah.
I don't think the art necessarily serves the story, but I recognize that as a writer and artist creator, he's not capable of stepping.
Sort of. It is less of a writer and artist creative than Scott Pilgrim was, because he had
Help.
He had help on this book.
Yeah, but it was like an art assistant, right? It wasn't.
Yeah, but I didn't.
So I mean, I imagine that in the same way as like an animation house. Like, this is my style. This is how I want you to continue. Like, so
yeah.
He's still controlling very narrowly how it's presented.
But it's massively different than Scott Pilgrim.
Okay.
Which is something I wanted to talk about later when we get to the art. But
so, like, I don't know. I felt like there was lots of good weird little nuggets, but I really didn't like the way that it was laid out for me.
Before we continue, I just have to say something. I don't very often get to see Brant really go off on a tangent about things that he doesn't like, because he does have a broad taste level, right? So, like, Brant is usually the friend I have that can find something redeeming in most of the things I hate.
There's things redeeming in this. I'm not saying there's not.
But no, what I wanted to say is that it always makes me feel bad that you don't dislike more things because you are vastly fucking entertaining once you get on a tear. The first thing I ever heard Brant go off on a tangent about was the White Wolf gaming system.
Oh, God.
And it was fucking a thing to behold, because he was like, but I said something about White Wolf and he was like, "Arr." And then by the time I was like, what don't you like about White Wolf? He was fucking champing at the bit. And then he was just off like a shot. And he was like, this. And it was fucking great. So
I'm glad I entertain.
I think I like this book now even more than I did when I got here.
Can I throw out my own little tangent while we're on this subject of Brant love?
are we on that subject?
Yeah, we're on that subject.
Something that I noticed a long time ago is that Brant is not one to necessarily show his emotions on the surface. And he does this particular little thing when he's miffed about something but doesn't want to admit it, where he does this diffident little kind of like air snort. And I always know when I hear that noise, like, he's got something that he wants to complain about. All right, Brant, how do we get it out of you? What do I need to do to get you to go on a tear? Because, as Joe has said, it's a thing to behold.
It is a thing to behold. I mean,
it's pretty beautiful.
I feel like I am as far as ranting goes, I can build up a full head of steam pretty easily, but
the difference is, this is the very fundamental difference between Joe and Brant. It's not about taste. It's like, you guys have very different tastes and stuff, and that's great. I mean, you're different people, but the difference is you both get that like apoplectic rage, and then Brant, the words flow out articulately. And things happen, and conclusions are made, and Joe says nonsense words that I'm like, you get so angry that words cannot form in your mouth. It is like a fiery furnace of hate in which nothing can be made.
I need to have the initial burn before I can kind of get to the point where I'm calm enough to be like, these are the things I really detested
it's
about
literally just Joe for like 4 minutes going, oh God! It's like, what I don't understand. What's happening? Are you having a heart attack? What's happening?
Brant is like a rocket. Like, he burns bright, and then he launches into the sky like a majestic eagle. Joe, I think of more like a steam train that builds up and builds up and builds up and then explodes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's very much like that.
But then, once I go, I can go.
Apparently, when I was in school, when I was in my undergrad, I was told in my freshman year that I had one very substantial tell about how I felt about the conversation, because at the time I was smaller than I am now. I hadn't hit my sudden growth spurt, and hats actually fit me at the time, which very few of them do anymore. So I used to wear baseball hats all the time, and apparently the position of the hat on my head gave a good indication for what I was thinking or feeling, because as people started to make me angrier and angrier about the things that they were saying that were obviously wrong, or whatever, I would move the hat around in these very punctuated ways. And so, like, if it was sitting on one side or something, people were like, okay, so we're pretty sure that he's not happy about what's being said. And it was just like a really good tell about how I was.
It's like when we were doing the Crisis, our three-peat, and I would repeatedly, my tell is I take my glasses off, and I just kind of like run my hand over my head, and I'm just like,
And then you take the book and just hit yourself in the face with it repeatedly because you're so mad.
I did want to respond to what Brand said, though.
Please do.
And I'm reminded of the conversation that we had about Hopeless Savages. And I was kind of the one person on the side of the table who really desperately did not like that book, even though I was willing to admit that it did have its high marks. And I think what it was, and what, if I'm hearing Brand correctly, his problem with this book is that there are certain moments or story elements that you're supposed to buy into very quickly in this story. And if you perchance do not buy into them, but they, for whatever reason, you're just like, no, I don't get that. I don't like that. That's not what I'm interested in. You just miss the entire story, and there's no way for you to get back into it because you have not bought into the like 3 critical things that you have to buy into in order to really participate in the story.
I think that can be true, and I almost think that's true in this case, but I feel like what happened for me more was that, well, right off the bat, he just kind of, I feel like I was getting 2 very different vibes off the book, and they were inherently contradictory and conflicting. And because of that, every time I got to a place of relative goodwill, it basically did something to kind of throw me off. And since I was already teetering on the edge because I had apprehension about the visual aspect of it, because I'm not a big fan of the art style, it was just like, so like, and this is where I understand, like, I get myself not into trouble, but I mean, I think this is true of everybody. Like, there are clearly writers who write in a certain way or artists who produce in a certain way. Like, Earth X is a perfect example. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things you can go back and tear that book apart about, but they're even visually. But there's something about the mix of the art direction and the plotting and the scripting of it that I'm willing to overlook its flaws because I'm so warmly invested in the other aspects of it. And so if I'm not as deeply into those other pieces, then it's not like I'm not willing to buy into the premise. It's like you're defeating your own premise here, from my perspective. And you haven't gotten me in the door far enough
the
to
flaws
afford
become
the goodwill.
Easier to see.
Yeah.
Well, it's what Joe says this phrase a lot that I like, which is, how much you like something is very often about how much you can forgive. And being able to forgive something, its flaws, I think comes from it affecting you, like, not even emotionally, but just like as a story early on. Like, if it gets you to buy into it completely early on, the flaws become a lot less apparent because you're invested. Right, and I agree with that. And I wanted to bring up something that I think it's not a counter argument, but is to support what everyone is saying here, basically. But Scott Pilgrim very much was successful in the age group of young people, the ages like 13 to 20 something.
Yeah.
And it was built in a way that was very much targeting that. It's a manga-sized book, which is targeting that like manga age readers versus old men who read single issues. Those are for old men. And then
by what you mean 30 and 40-year-olds.
Yeah, which is
old people.
Fucking old as balls, basically, is what I'm saying here. And
go fuck yourself. Excuse me.
Yeah. Oh, are you okay over there, Joe? Yeah, I just want to make sure that. Okay, good. This book was very much a target at that the similar audience as well. Like this was made in cooperation with Scholastic. Like this is a young adult reader book.
Now
that
does actually help me some.
Yeah,
because I mean, what's funny about that is that it helps me, and I find it as equally damning in another venue.
Exactly.
Because like some of the things that make certain young adult novels so impressive in the meta, Hunger Games, although some of those books...
God, that book is fucking awful. I'm sorry.
Yeah, actually.
Bring the hate. You can't... That book... Oh, I'm so mad
Harry
about
Potter,
that. How
right?
bad
Like
that
universally
book is written.
adored, loved by
sure.
all age ranges.
Fuck that book.
Harry Potter.
Oh, God,
I agree.
I hate
Okay.
Harry Potter so much. I mean, no disrespect to anybody who loves those books. You're welcome to have them. But from my own personal perspective, they were 100% derivative of so much fantasy literature that came before it that was in every measure better than it.
Well, that's...
Just my personal perspective.
I don't disagree with you. Something I think that is important about those books is they were written for kids when you guys weren't kids anymore, and I was a kid when they were coming
and
out.
That's fair.
And they're an aggregate of so many mythological ideas. And yes, she's not an expert writer. She became better as things went on. Like, her new crime stories are really good.
Wait.
Good.
I'm going to make an analogy here, and Joe's going to agree with me. Harry Potter is the Big Bang Theory of children's fantasy.
Disagree. 100%.
On its face and in its substance.
I agree with the spirit, but I think of what you're saying, but I have to agree with it.
You just did the nerd version of going too far.
Big Bang Theory is, I think, at its core, mean.
Yeah, it is.
It's very mean-spirited, and Harry Potter, I think, had good intentions.
It does.
I think where it goes wrong for me was that we talk a lot on the show about a work that exceeds the talent of the author.
Yeah.
And that's, I
agree with that.
I'll admit, it is a fucking monumental feat for a woman that had never written anything professionally to write a fucking epic. All right?
And that's fair. And I will give her all the credit in the world for having actually produced those
she
books.
made some mistakes. She made some missteps. Some pretty fucking big ones in my estimation.
And she's admitted to some, too, which is interesting to see.
Fair.
And she's a phenomenal human being, and I love her for that. But her new crime stuff is, like, a massive step, and I feel like that's her sophomore effort because I count all of Harry Potter as like one.
But let's get back to what you were saying initially.
Yes. First, disagree with Big Bang Theory because I'm with Joe that the Big Bang Theory is mean-spirited, and in no way is Harry Potter like the brunt of the joke. And it's not like, hey, nerdy kids who have no friends, look at how fucking stupid they are. Like, that's the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
Harry Potter is like, this is the kid that you wish you could be. Like, you have no friends, your life is terrible, don't you wish you could go to a magic school? And that's a great premise. Again, I agree with Joe that it was a task that she was not equipped to fully write about.
I have so many problems with that series, but this is not the venue to talk about
and that's fine. Let me get back to it. Okay, so that was my head rewinding. You could almost hear it on the tape. So this is kind of what I was talking about the tape has to respin itself up during the story. I feel like he's afraid that he's going to lose his young readers. And in that sense, he's like...
And I think he's actually almost being pedantic in doing so because
absolutely.
He runs the risk of actually... So... I have to go back just a second. Innovate and iterate is something that gets bandied about a lot. So I want to just throw out there that there are many things that is universally beloved that are just a giant mishmash of things that did it better than others. Star Wars! So, now that we've gotten that out of our system, let's go back to the fact that...
Are you invoking the name of the Holy Trinity?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I am. But that's my problem with this thing, too, is that that's why I said it was doubly damning in some senses. Like, in some ways, it helps me soften my critique to know that he's actually intending to take 12, 14, maybe even 16 or 18-year-olds and guide them through a concept that's kind of, it's deep. This is a deep notion, right? Like, and that's why when it's been done in other places, it's been done in very like, oh, whoa, I never even considered that could be the ramification of simply changing this little thing. But I almost think, it almost feels like to me that it's like, he's a better artist than he even gives himself credit for. I sat there. I wasn't standing while I was reading this. I was sat there looking at a 9-panel spread, thinking to myself, you could have cut half the words and I would have known exactly what you were saying.
Yeah.
Your art is good enough.
Yes.
Why are you telling me what you're saying?
And I
Don't
wonder...
read your comics standing at a lectern?
Not always. Only occasionally.
He reads
but not
them
this one.
aloud to his congregation.
That's right.
No, and I agree with that. I think that may be editorial insight going like, maybe these people aren't familiar enough with comics. Like maybe you should show more. And I don't know. I'm assuming.
I think that were that true, that would be a case of underestimating your audience.
Yes.
Even if this is written for kids, kids
Yes.
are more canny than most adults give them credit for.
100% agree.
And I just want to say real quick, I wouldn't assume that the editors at Scholastic would do that because they did such a great job editing the Harry Potter books.
They didn't edit those books. Anyway.
No, I know. They just published them in the United
This
States.
this was not published by Scholastic.
No.
It was
No,
published
it
by
was-
Ballantine Books.
Oh, sorry. That's who I meant.
Okay, yeah.
Not Scholastic.
Damn it,
And,
even my half joke doesn't work anymore.
Ballantine, this was meant to go into their like young adult line,
Yeah.
from its inception.
Like,
That's
yeah,
cool.
no, I'm not arguing with your assertion that this is for young adults. Like, that is the
I
demographic
just
that they're going
Can't
towards.
remember company names.
I still don't know that the editors would be so bold as to suggest, like, let's dumb it down a little bit.
Really? I kind of think that's
Wow.
Or that Bryan
It
Lee
depends.
O'Malley would go along with
I mean,
that.
it depends. You've got editors who would, you have editors that don't. I mean, that's the stories
Yeah.
that you get out of the comics all the time, or the editors. You've got both sides of that coin.
good editors and bad editors. Yeah.
Yeah.
sure.
Like the whole thing going on right now with DC Comics, the Jeff
yeah.
Johns versus the Dan DiDio.
Oh yeah. The divide is beginning. I can feel the rifts
cracks are
opening.
starting to show in the facade.
Kate, before I launch into a huge tirade about Miyazaki films, Cade, what did you think about this book?
Overall, I liked it.
Big surprise from Cade.
We
on
all
that
just
one.
turned to Cade and stared at him.
Yeah, that was a little awkward. So when I read the books that we do on the show, I set aside time every night before I sleep to read, and I divide it into a specific number of pages based on how many pages the work we're doing is. So this was like 170 pages, and I had mathed it out ahead of time, and then I sat down Monday night and I started reading it, and I never actually looked at the page number I was on, so I ended up finishing it that first night, and it went by really quick.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what I thought about it until I actually reread part of it today. And there were two things that stuck out to me that I liked. The first of which was that Ray is a homosexual character, which was awesome. And I've realized, like, he didn't play as big of a role as the gay roommate in Scott Pilgrim, obviously.
Wallace, who is my favorite character.
But, I mean, still, if you were looking for it, like, the first time you meet him, she says, like, him and his husband, and then it's got a picture there of two guys and a girl, a daughter, or son, I couldn't really tell, but I imagined daughter because I have been watching Modern Family.
I think that is worthy to note that Bryan Lee O'Malley is Canadian, and they're very, like, what would be considered, like, progressive liberal in a lot of their
Social policies.
yeah, including gay marriage, too, which I think has been legal in Canada for a
Long
while. Yeah.
Even, I think maybe back into the 90s.
Yeah.
Once again, View from the Gutters is brought to you by not knowing facts about shit.
That's why I
Definitely not
look...
brought to you by gay marriage, because we don't know anything about that.
We don't, unfortunately. What you can't see at home is the look of me starting to say a thing and then going, I don't actually know if this is correct, but like when this happened. So I just start to say like, it happened a while, and then I just turn to look at everybody else and be like, someone please jump in and help me. So that's what you don't see. Kate, what else did you notice in your reread?
The other thing was, and I was pretty proud of myself for doing this after taking shit on the Daredevil episode for not like reading every word that was in the background of the fucking picture. Is that
they were clearly blind, Cade. Cade, they were clearly fucking blind.
It was a school for the blind. That's the whole point of that story.
Oh my god! No, they were all just wearing glasses for no reason.
Gay marriage was legalized in Canada on July 20th, 2005 with the passing of the Civil Marriage Act.
Oh, thank you.
As opposed to the Uncivil Marriage Act.
Who is the lead sponsor on that bill?
For.
Introduced by Prime Minister Paul Martin, or Martin, I think.
Marty.
As we lovingly refer to him as Marty.
Okay, so yes. The very first scene in which it shows the basement in that splash page spread, or the 2-page spread, and it's like in the first 20 or 30 pages.
Yeah, it's pretty early.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to say within the first 10 pages.
One of my favorite pages in the whole book was that layout of the basement.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Cool.
Oh yeah.
And when I was looking at that, the very first thing I noticed was that only one room did not have a person in it.
Yeah.
And that was the storeroom.
The walk-in, yeah.
I was like, this room means something. Like right away, I was just like, this room means something.
And also, the lights off.
You were right
in
the
it,
first
too.
time. It's on pages 28 and 29.
Oh, 28 and 29.
And it's the lights off in that room, too, so your eyes like immediately drawn to it in the art, I think.
Yeah,
well,
and so,
I mean, to be...
It's a walk-in, so there
Yeah,
wouldn't
like,
be
to be
a...
fair, like, one of the things I liked most about this book is it's about the two things that are very close to my heart, which is cooking and food. And...
I think that's one
That's
thing.
one thing, Joe.
No...
Obviously,
you like to
obviously
cook
to Joe, they're more than one thing.
Okay.
Food,
My five
just
favorite
because you
things-
cook food doesn't mean you like food too. There are plenty of people
Why
that
would
cook
you-
food.
Why would you cook food if you don't like
unless
food?
it was
Because
like
it's your fucking
horrible
job.
job, and all you did was make gruel every day.
There are plenty of reasons why there could be people who like to cook but don't eat the food.
there are
The same
also,
reason that there are people who design nuclear weapons but don't fucking drop them on people.
Yeah, and also...
That's not true. If you make
could
nuclear
have-
bombs, it's because you like blowing people up and killing them.
You could have a story that would
Right
be
in,
about
too.
cooking.
Yeah. All you
And
nuclear
that
engineers
one
out
of
there.
your characters was a chef or a cook that had nothing to do with food because they never spoke about it. And he speaks about both in this. So
Yeah.
eat my shorts. All right?
also, you could go the opposite direction like me, and I love eating food, but I don't like cooking it.
And so... I mean,
Anyway.
Joe, you lost some steam on that one.
You know, because the fucking bearded one is here, right?
Coming into the engine.
Why everybody's
out of
bearded in the
steam.
room? That doesn't
We all
make
know.
sense.
Everybody knows who I'm talking about. That's
they?
not...
Do they?
That's
Cade,
not...
Cade, stop
case,
antagonizing
Stop
him.
Like this story because it's about cooking and
it's
food,
about
which are
food,
two
but
of your
also-
favorite things.
But
Yeah.
also because I'm old. I'm getting to be old. Older, you know, I'm approaching middle age, and there's a lot of, I'm getting married. It'll be my second marriage, which is something, you know, like I have a kid, and when I was fucking 18, 19, when I was the age of the characters in this book,
Well, they're not.
I was like,
Some of them are, I guess.
like
Yeah.
the main characters in this book.
She is late
She's almost
20s,
30.
almost 30.
Yeah, she's like 29.
29.
Oh, is she? Oh,
Yeah.
she is, isn't she?
She's
I mean,
But
That's why she
Hazel is-
refers to all the other people as kids.
It's
Right,
kids,
'cause they're all early 20s, they're
Hazel
late.
is 20.
Hazel is
turns
21.
21 in the
Yeah,
book.
and
Right.
Yana is 20.
Okay.
One.
That's
No,
okay.
20.
And
No, she's turning 21.
Andrew is also young,
Yes.
too.
Just effing looked at this.
No, yeah. Hannah is 21. Yana has not yet turned 21. She's like, I'm not even 21 yet.
Yeah. Once again,
But
our memories.
I mean, that, and I think even more so when I was 29, 30, I was going through like a lot of shit. I had just been It was right around that time when I felt like I had thyroid cancer, and then I had my thyroid removed, and then like a year later I had a sarcoma removed, and I got back into school, and
You
divorced.
had been like recently divorced.
Yeah, well, I separated with my wife, and I started living with
A mutual friend of ours.
well, everybody knows who she is because she's the fucking same woman I live with now.
Oh, I thought you meant before that, in which we had both lived with the same person at different times in our life.
Yes,
Who
no,
need not be named on the show.
I never lived with. I mean, my
We
ex.
both lived in the same house, though. That
Yes.
greenhouse over there, but just at different
Oh
times.
yes,
That's
at
what I
different
was
times.
talking
No,
about.
that's true.
Okay.
I did stay there
Anyway.
after I left my now.
Oh,
ex-wife.
I forgot that I lived with your ex-wife, too.
Yes, you
Sorry,
also.
that
Andrew
happened
also lived with my ex-wife before he knew me. So we both heard about each other before we ever met each other.
Yeah, my memory is
Just a
not
very
so good.
Olympia experience. But so, and there have been often times when I think back, and you ask like if you could do these things over again, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, would you make the same choices? And I'm finally to the point now where I'm like, yeah, like pretty much every
Yeah.
choice in my life I'd make exactly the same because I look where I am now and I realize that where I am now is the product of all of those decisions. There is one thing I would change though, and it's a small thing. When I was like 15, I was in Atlanta in the mall and I was with my brother and this black guy came up next to me and was like, "Give me 5, homie," or something like that. And I just kind of like freaked out and froze. I would go back and give him a high five.
Yeah, you don't leave somebody hanging.
Yeah,
like that.
but like, and he just wanted 5. He like put his hand up, and all I had to do was hold my hand out, and he would have fucking slapped me 5, and then I would have slapped him 5, and I would have been a very cool honky. And
You monster.
I
Yeah.
am, and so I would change that
Huh.
because let me tell you something. I still feel
I
like
thought
an
you were-
ass for not doing.
I thought
that.
you were gonna say I would change meeting any of you
I
and
would
go on
change-
with my life being happy.
No, clearly not.
Well, I think that is something that is a solid critique of this book in a lot of ways. Is this book feels immature to me in
Yes.
its content because I feel like, and maybe this is me reading too much into this and too much into the author's intent and like what does that really mean and all that bullshit, and I hate that. But I feel like Bryan Lee O'Malley is sometimes a very immature person because of the content of a lot of Scott Pilgrim is about like how do you overcome this immaturity, and Scott is in the movie they play Scott off more like he's just kind of dumb, but in the book he's a fucking asshat. Like he is an asshole. Like,
Oh, no,
Scott
he is.
That book is about how to not be an asshole, the Scott Pilgrim story. Like that is what that book should be called. And I feel like a lot of that comes out of Bryan Lee O'Malley's own experience, either being an asshole or having assholes interact with him, but somehow everybody is like okay with them being an asshole. And that's like
Well,
everybody just kind of writes off Scott Pilgrim and is like, that's just Scott Pilgrim. He's
It's
just an
this
asshole.
period after you graduate high school and you're getting into your early 20s, and your friends have started to realize that high school was just the beginning, right? Like,
Are you
like,
kidding? Those were the best times of my life.
No.
No,
like-
hold on a second. And I
Yeah.
think that this is an incredibly good point because there are a lot of people that get trapped into this mentality
Absolutely.
of high school was the best time in my life.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I don't like Harry Potter because I feel like it's lionizing of high school and it's going, these are the days when you will make all of the important friendships in your life and nothing after this matters because this is where everything goes
I
down.
do think that you can make some very important.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
certainly
your
it's
high school-
formative. Certainly
yeah.
it's important, but by no means the most important.
No.
yeah,
And for me, at least, all of the most important things in my life happened after I got out of high school.
And
I was a
that's-
shitty person when I graduated from high school, and it was being friends with people like Brant that really got my head out of my ass.
A lot of people were shitty when they were kids.
Oh,
Like,
dude,
just as,
yeah.
like
That's
almost
true.
all of them universally.
But my
That's
point is
why-
that it's easy for you to look at this as
Brant's
a fairly
freaking out
mature
over there.
person and say, you know, well, this is a very immature perspective.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people have that perspective and can learn something from this story.
And go ahead, Brant. Sorry,
I
keep going.
I gotta get this out. I would counter, just because I think it is relevant to this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Potter is actually meant to show that many people feel like high school is the most important time, that confronting leaving high school is akin to a quest of annihilation in the face of greater forces, and the epilogue of Harry Potter proves that the things that matter most happen after you've gone through that transition.
Well, it also proves that J.K. Rowling didn't know how to fucking end that story, because that fucking epilogue was insulting.
And she herself has said that epilogue was terrible.
Yeah, because everybody came out and was like, that epilogue's so bad. And so the creators of Mass Effect go back and they're like, let's change the ending because everybody thought it was shitty. And it was probably totally
we are
fine.
Definitely not having that fucking conversation.
That's exactly what happened. Everyone was like, it's shit. And so as a writer, I guess you have to go, okay, I apologize. It wasn't that good. Even though I fucking wrote it, and of course it's exactly what I wanted to put on the ending. Like, I get it. She made apologies. She makes apologies about the series. Say, hey, sometimes I don't know what I'm fucking doing. Sometimes I'm not a great writer. But is that in response to no one ever saying anything out loud? Like, unsolicited? Did she just come out and go, you know what I'm really sorry for? I missed a comma in the first book. Like, no, this is shit that people were like, you write not good. And she was like, okay, I'm sorry. Like, it doesn't come unsolicited. Like, that ending's fine. It's a fine ending. And I agree with Brant that, like, what it shows you is life goes on.
There's a difference between...
I agree with Brant in that way, that yes, like, the reason the epilogue is there is to be like, oh, Harry has a family.
Well, you say that like it's shitty. You have a family and you very much like that family.
Harry ended up with Ginny, and Ron ended up with Hermione, and that was the end, and happy.
There is a difference between execution and substance. I agree that maybe her execution was not that great, but I think she was trying to make an articulated point about the nature of what is important.
And I would not...
And I think a lot of people were pissed off because they're like, where's all the fucking fireballs and Harry being in Auror and all this bullshit and like the giant Michael Bay explosion, because that's what this is all about. And it's like, no, the entire series is not about that shit.
Right.
The entire series is about a kid in high school.
Right.
The giant Michael Bay explosion when he fights Voldemort is about getting you to pay attention long enough to realize that the story is about a kid in high school.
It's missing the metaphor for the lightsabers. It's like something that happens a lot in sci-fi. It's just like, but the lightsaber, you know, like there's fucking other shit going on there that isn't just like a cool sci-fi setting.
You know, the only thing I liked about those books was the redhead got the girl.
It's so good.
You're biased.
You may have a bias there, sir.
In any case, my point is that for all that you can say, like, Bryan Lee O'Malley is either an immature person or has dealt with a lot of immature people, like, and I agree with you, like, there are a lot of immature characters in his books,
yes,
and a lot of it is focused on overcoming that immaturity, but I think that that's an important point to make, because there are a substantial number of people out there who need to hear that message.
And I agree. And the point was building to the immaturity that is prevalent in Seconds it's a good message, but I feel like it's not made well enough. Is that she has the ability to change the past, and what stops her from changing the past is not herself. You know, what I wanted this end of the story to be was that last mushroom. She chooses to like not find the mushrooms. Like,
that's what I thought
not
it was gonna
her.
be with.
She doesn't make a choice. Like, it's not her.
You know what I mean? I completely agree. This entire story is like, this is a metaphor about what happens if you try to change things that you don't do. And in the end, somebody else is going to fix it for you, and it's all going to end up okay. In fact, idyllic. No, it's not. If you're going to try to make this point, if you're going to try to tell this story, the point is not that the spirit of the house is going to eat the last mushroom and you're going to end up with everything that you ever wanted.
But I didn't see it that way. Like, I'm reading this story in the beginning, and there's really, like, all the problems that happen because she interferes. If she had just let things go, this is, to me, a story not necessarily about immaturity, but about second-guessing yourself.
But that is immaturity.
But I don't think it is insecurity. I don't think it's immaturity. I think it's insecurity. I think it's a basic human insecurity.
The reason that things turn out okay is not because the house spirit eats the mushroom or whatever, or she gets her wish. It's that she stops living in the past and going, I regret all of these things, and started actually confronting the reality as it existed right then and there and going, I'm going to take the steps to make it better, not keep going like, I should have done this, I should have done this.
Only because it becomes a story in which her restaurant is inhabited by skeletons floating through the multiverse on a tree of whatever, and she has to go take the magic pot back to the witch, and like, she doesn't make a human decision that is just like, I'm gonna stop looking at my past because I'm not going that way. Like, I can't fucking fix that shit. Like, I need to move forward. And the end of the story is not dealing with the problems that she's created. It's once again undoing the problems that she created. It's like she goes back and fixes the fact that she tried to fix shit. A stronger story, in my opinion, would have been, well, I fucked all this shit up again by trying to go back and change that, and now, for the second time, I have to live with my decisions. And she makes her way out of it. I think that's a strong story. And instead, the magic mushroom gets eaten, it goes back in time, and none of the bad decisions were made.
I agree that I definitely would have liked to see her go back and have a I think it would have been neat to see her have a dialogue where there's stuff where she goes, listen, you think this is a good idea, because of course it seems like a good idea. How could it not? But like, where you are and who you are is predicated on the fact that you did these things. And the fact is, you need to live with that, because I've seen what happens when you don't, and it's nowhere you want to go.
I thought it was going to be a test. I felt like the mushrooms were a test.
And like, while I disagree that it's an idyllic ending, because while she does get, her restaurant it's over budget and the opening gets pushed back. I think it may be somewhat idyllic because it's popular, but that makes sense because everybody in town knew her and everybody in town knew her food and would want to eat it.
Yeah, but she gets the guy and she has
gets
the nice
guy.
stuff.
The other people get the guy. Her restaurant is exactly the way she wants it, like all this stuff. I think my big thing is that I'm actually not willing to go as far as you guys, or specifically Andrew. Like, I'm actually willing to support Toby all the way up through. I feel like the reset thing should have been she is exactly where she was before. Well, I guess she kind of was. I mean,
she goes back to that, and that's kind of the thing. Is like,
I guess it should have been unpacked more, because I guess it felt like it was so just like she's back where she was before, and it's just great.
Well, and I agree about the resolution, but I do think
it does skip forward. Like, it skips past all of the hard work that she puts in after everything goes back and before you get the very ending. And it starts with a moment where she goes and she talks with her ex-boyfriend instead of avoiding him, which she had been doing the entire rest of the story.
And I think,
that's the moment when, like, a lot of hard work happens that just gets skipped past completely.
Yeah. And
I appreciate what you're saying, Chard, because I could see myself making very similar arguments. Yeah. But for whatever reason, like, I did not feel that need in this story.
You like magic a lot.
I mean, I agree.
I do.
And I agree with you on the resolution. But
no, wizards are my best thing.
I know.
I think, on the flip side, while I agree with you about the resolution, I think that the message here is, if you let things take, like, there's the saying, right? If you take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves, right? If you take care of the little things and you make sure you're doing what you need to do and you're where you want to be, the big shit will take care of itself.
Well, and also taking care of the little things is the hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the message I get at the end.
Colossus, in which case you're fucked.
Well, yeah, I mean, unless you have a very special sword.
Crawl over that thing and hit the blue glowing thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, but you could get it down. The thing is that, you just have to hold down the thumbstick to hold on to the... But anyways... I think
no, dude, it's the right trigger.
Oh, right, it is right trigger.
Controls that game in one of the fundamental problems with that game is that the core controls are dog shit, and so you have to change them all, and they don't quite remap properly because you've got a piece of shit PlayStation controller.
That's fair. I think the reason at the end of the day I walked away from this liking it as much as I did is because it mirrors my experience, which is because I don't get to eat a mushroom and go back and not do this thing or that thing. I don't get to eat a magic mushroom and go back and have a conversation with my now ex-wife about having a baby and about how that would fuck me up and blah blah blah, right? Like, and when I look back on it, that's what led to the decline of my marriage. It's just like a conversation that I couldn't have. I don't get to do that, but that's okay, because where I am now, I'm taking care of shit, right? Like, and that's the thing. It's like, I stopped concentrating on everybody else and I started concentrating on myself, and now I'm closer to where I want to be. And when she stops worrying about all this shit that she could change and all the decisions she didn't make, and second guessing herself about the location of her restaurant, and second guessing herself about the choices she made with Max and what she's doing with Andrew and blah, blah, blah. And she just fucking gets down and is herself.
Yeah.
And says what she needs to say. That's when shit starts coming together for her.
Well, and that's the whole moral or message of the story of, you can't change the past. It's not just, you can't change the past because we know that, but it is.
Wait, you can't?
I'm actually lying. I can change the past, but
many of us can. You, though, listening at home, cannot change the past.
You have not learned our secrets.
You are not a wizard. If you focus on the past, it will destroy your present.
Absolutely.
And it's like the Ouroboros, like eating its own tail. Like, you will just get in this, like, oh, well, if I had done this different, then maybe this would be fine. If I had done this different, and that's what she's doing. She's going back and she's changing, like, oh, well, if I had picked a different restaurant, everything would have worked out fine. And it didn't. Like, that's the thing, is, like, you cannot make, there's no way through the Choose Your Own Adventure book in which everything works out absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, shit's always going to go slightly wrong, but you have to just deal with that, correct the course, tack into the wind, get back on the right course, get on your line. Things will be fine.
Yeah.
Sailing metaphor.
And, like, the thing I think in the end that makes me okay with the resolution that happens is that while I would have liked to see her eat that last mushroom and have that dialogue with herself or whatever, when she gives it to the house spirit, that's her letting go. That's her going, I've done this, and now I'm willing to step back and fucking just let go. Because that's what gets her in so much trouble in the first place, is she's not willing to let go.
Right.
And that's just my read on it. Like, I don't necessarily, I can see, like, I definitely, it makes sense that this is a young adult's title. Like, this is, and there are parts where it is maybe a little I wouldn't go so far as to say pedantic, but it is kind of maybe overly wordy in places, and I
feel like it is a bit, like, it talks down a little bit to the reader. I think that's the problem that Brant was having with it, is that it takes too much time to explain it.
Yeah, but I feel like pedantry is like intent, and I don't feel like, while it does talk down a little bit, I don't feel like it's intentionally talking down.
Oh, it absolutely
Here's my observation. I think you're right that intent is often the root of that phenomenon. And I think that Tobiah is right in something he articulated earlier, which is that repetition can carry power. So he may not have intended. He may have, in fact, intended for the repetition to carry power, but I think it came across as ultimately, in my reading of it, diminishing the weight of his execution. Now, it could be just me who then felt like, because of that, I was basically being talked down to. Like, oh, you don't get what's in the panels. Here's what this means. But that's how I felt. I was like, I get it, dude. Like, thank you. The metaphor. I'm a fan. I am familiar. Like,
we're gonna have a talk about The Dark Knight Rises after this episode, and I'm gonna tell you exactly what it feels like to be fucking described everything that you're seeing.
Oh, are you talking about Inception?
No.
No, I'm sorry. What were we talking about?
After we have the discussion about The Dark Knight Rises, we can have the conversation about Inception.
And I think that we've made a lot of great points. I would like to talk about the art.
Yes.
And I would like to do that before I am 100% rotisserie cooked in this studio.
Yeah, you have 5 minutes to talk about the art, because I'm going to fucking die.
Yes.
There is... I know you didn't care for it, Brant. I really like O'Malley's art. I think it's a cool style. The one thing that I thought was really interesting that I wanted to talk about briefly was the way that most of the characters are drawn in this really, like, chibi-fied, like, very kind of action figure-y style. Except for the ex-boyfriend, Max, who was drawn in a very realistic style.
Yes,
and I thought that was an interesting choice.
I love Bryan O'Malley's little chibi people.
I like them
incredibly
too.
cute.
Yeah.
There's this part where she's like looking in the dresser drawer, and like she's just gotten up out of bed, so she's just wearing underwear. And when she kneels down, he gives her just a little bit of butt crack, and I thought that was entirely cute.
It throws me out of the story at first, and after about 30 pages, like, my brain flicks over to the right station, and I get it. And, like, I get into the story, and I stop really thinking about it.
Yeah,
But I can see how it would be distracting.
Surprising no one, I love the art because, this is all the kind of shit that I really like.
Yeah.
Like, this hits all of the buttons that I find most appealing. Like, it has that cool line. Like, this is a very distinct style. This is Bryan Lee O'Malley. I love that about artists. I love it when I can look at a single panel from an artist and go, I know who that is.
Yeah.
I love that. It's like listening to, like, 4 notes of a record and going, that's Miles Davis.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's cool. I like that. I love a cartoonist's mentality towards comic book art, in which exaggeration is part of the experience. It's very anime. It's very like, wow, suddenly they're just like an outline with a giant sweat bead on their head. Like, what is happening? Like, that is, they're not actually transforming into that, but that is
There's
their emotion.
A ton of push and pull in this.
Absolutely. And I like the way that each character feels unique and different, and I like that. But something that blew me away in this book is, if you read Scott Pilgrim, when I read Scott Pilgrim, it was black and white, and this book has phenomenal colors.
Oh, the colors are amazing. Yeah.
The colors is absolutely outstanding, and the way in which he draws in this is so much more sophisticated, I feel like, than Scott Pilgrim. I don't know if that's because he had an art assistant. I don't know if it's because he took more time, or it's because he's a better artist, or whatever. But you see much, much more detailed setup panels. You've got establishing shots. You've got cool cutaways to the house. There's so much more going on. He uses perspective considerably better in this than he does in Scott
That's what
Pilgrim.
I opened up with, was that this feels like the work of a more mature artist.
I agree. I think his art improved massively.
This is another one where they used they used a specific color palette depending on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it works to good effect in this story.
I'm less of a fan of the moments in which reality starts to crumble, because I feel like that's hard to do in a comic book in which you're not seeing the motion. Like, my mind has to fill in the gaps, and I've seen enough movies and played enough games in which that happens that I'm able to fill in the gaps, but a lot is left to my imagination in those, woo, this part's trippy, and it's hard to do, and I think that some artists are much better at it than others. And I think O'Malley does a serviceable job of it. Yeah. But the trippiness could be trippier.
Trippier is hard to do.
It's difficult.
In a good, solid way.
I was a major fan of the art in this. I did, before we move on to recommendations, unless anybody else...
No.
I have one more
Oh,
thing.
go ahead.
No, I mean, I've already sweated out, all of my fluids. I'm
You've
only
lost
hallucinating now.
12 pounds we've each lost. There's just a pool of... We record this in a kiddie pool, and we collect all the sweat later.
Well, Toby is not... We're not being rotisseried, because that would imply that we were being cooked on a spit over fire. We're being braised, which is a moist heat cooking method, because it's fucking... There's 5 of us in here.
It's very muggy.
It's incredibly muggy, and we are all being stewed in our own goddamn juices.
It smells great.
Anyway.
Yes.
Cade,
exactly.
Continue, please.
When we were talking about the art, I remembered about some specific ways he draws Hazel and the differences between Hazel and Katie. Mm-hmm. And it reminded me of this. I don't know if subtle is the right word, but the jealousy she has towards Hazel, while at the same time really liking her. It was kind of like a love-hate thing, because there were always those times where she's like, she's so tall and she's wearing heels. How is that fair?
When she cuts her hair at the end, she's like, Hazel cut her hair. I actually cried. I like all those moments of just
and she's like going on an internal monologue, and then she's like, her hair is so pretty.
Yeah.
And it's just those... I did like those moments.
Me too.
I thought that was pretty
How
cute.
did you guys feel about the Scott Pilgrim references?
I liked them.
I missed them entirely because I have.
There's one panel where Scott and Ramona are having dinner at Seconds.
Oh.
There's also the bread makes you fat reference,
I hated that.
I thought it was hilarious.
It's I feel like it's the only thing people know about Scott Pilgrim.
It's the easy shout.
It is the easy shout out. No, absolutely.
I hated it.
And I mean, I like you was introduced to Scott Pilgrim when it was still being filmed. Like, a friend of mine was I'm reading Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life.
I was reading it when it was there were 2 or 3 volumes of it.
Yeah, and my buddy kind of was like, oh, you should read this. And I was like, okay, and I read it, and he was like, well, it's still coming out.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's cool. And he's like, yeah, they're optioning it. They're going to make it into a movie. Michael Cera's going to be it. And I was like, I haven't fucking heard anything about this. And then, afterwards, it was like, oh, Scott Pilgrim, blah, 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 blah. And, but I like Bryan Lee O'Malley's art, and I really like, as somebody that remembers fondly, my youth and being 18 and 19 and 20 and the people that I met and what I was doing, and kind of that slow trek out of that time in my life, Scott Pilgrim resonated with me a great deal in the same way that this resonated with me a great deal. In that sometimes you gotta fucking grit your teeth and fucking just get through something. And that's always kind of the last thing you want to do. You're always holding on to the last vestiges of this thing. And so, like, when you finally close the book on a chapter of your life and you're like, well, that's it. That's how it happened. That's how it's always going to have happened. And that's it. There's a freedom that comes with that. But the fucking journey to get to that is difficult as all get out. And so, I think he's solid. I don't know. Like,
let me put it this way. Are you going to put this into Audrey's hands?
Oh God, yeah.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
Yeah, Audrey will. I think Audrey will fucking love this too. Like,
I want to bring up something that I've kind of been holding off on, but
oh my God, you're gonna fucking kill. No, go ahead.
I'm gonna murder. For you. I'm gonna murder Joe.
I know. I feel like I'll just go down and record tonight for the podcast and the schwitz. It's good. It's all good.
I see a lot of parallels between this and a Miyazaki film like Spirited Away, in that this is a story about, some abstract concepts, but they're based on a very real idea. There's a very specific life lesson intended to be learned from them, and something that Miyazaki does so well in his films is he lets the images speak for themselves. And it's because he's an animator, and they're fantastic animated films. And it's something I wish more comic book readers would pick up, is letting the art speak for itself. Yeah. And I think Brant's right that Bryan Lee O'Malley is talented enough that he could have taken out a lot of the wordage in this. But what people often glean from Miyazaki films are like, oh, they're so visually impressive and the story is so heartfelt and so, personal. And something they forget to look at is the execution of how that happens. And I think that it's something that I would love to see more people look at and take into account, because this book could have been infinitely more powerful if the imagery was allowed to speak where the words were forced to.
Yeah.
Totes.
Yeah.
I agree.
So everybody watch Miyazaki and learn stuff. So.
All right. Yeah. Recommendations?
What did you...
All right, Brant. It's cool. I'm just wasting away here.
It's good for you. So, just to piggyback off of that, because it helped me articulate, it's helping my brain, is that I think the problem that I have is that, in particular, and I realize that this might be my highly ingrained Western cultural values, but the problem I have always had with the quote-unquote chibi style, which I think this emulates to a certain extent, is that I don't take it seriously. Right. I love certain comedic franchises when guys have blood coming out of their nose and little, sweat stuff. But when you're trying to tell me this kind of deeper story, it's very hard.
Yeah.
To keep me there and not be like... It'd be like me reading an Avengers... It'd be like me reading Civil War with Scotty Young doing the illustration as the baby Avengers, which on one hand...
I just jizzed my pants.
I'm like, that's
which
the best
on one
thing
hand
ever.
would be awesome, but on the other hand, like, I'm not going to buy some of the beats of that story as presented if a baby Captain America and a baby... Iron Man are smashing each other in the face, and I'm supposed to be like, this is a deep metaphor for the nature of
I
government
totally
control.
want to read about baby Iron Man now.
So there's that, and then I feel like that was my problem with the narration part.
Yeah.
With 2 is that, and you guys spoke to it, right? Like the kind of like the cute nods to her tension with the other woman, the kind of interior monologue. I feel like it's weirdly misplaced in this story that's meant to carry a certain level of gravity, and especially because it occurs to me that the interior monologue stuff caps the story. She does it a little bit in the middle, but it's really weighted on either end. So it's meant to be like this like light airy entry in and this light airy entry out, and I feel like the difference specifically with Miyazaki is that Miyazaki does not pull the punch. Like, he does present you with very childlike imagery. He does present you with these very idyllic things, and then he shows you that the forest is corrupted because of the evil of man.
Then he punches you right in your heart.
And then he punches you right in the heart. And so that's the thing, is that I think that, and this has come up a lot in raising my son, especially with my wife being studying what she's studying. Like, and this is also germane to my personal interests. There's a lot of there's a handful at least, or schools of psychology, but also mythology that say that we now live in a society that that not only underestimates that children are capable of absorbing heavier cultural concepts. Like, we're willing to let them watch machine gun shit, blow up in the background, or not, but not show them sex. But also that we still have this weird elusive thing about loss and love and these deeper, heavier emotional concepts. We shield children from them, even though they can handle them, and then because of them, they become immature to them. And so part of it for me in this story is just this kind of weird nebulous sensation, like, he's not really giving it its full weight, but he wants them to understand the full weight. And and I guess if I had the strict sense, based on his body of work, that was an intentional choice by O'Malley to make some kind of meta-content thing. Like, I'm not going to be completely mature about this story because it's actually, in fact, a commentary on the lack of full maturity of its characters. I'd be like, master stroke. But I'm kind of feeling like that's not what happened, and so I'm just kind of like, eh. So, yeah.
I think that you bring up a good point about the Western, like that Western upbringing and Western cultural mentality of the chibi art does something very different in the Japanese society than when we see it in our Western stuff being emulated from that. And it brought to mind a series that I think is tonally like very heavy and very serious. And yet at the same time, it's just filled with chibi and just...
Are we thinking about the same thing?
I would like you to guess.
I'm going to say Bone.
No, I was going to say
That's what I was thinking of.
Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Oh, yeah.
Which is in a fucking intense series about horrible shit, and all I need to say is what is the Nina?
No, dude,
and then just like... Come play with me,
God.
Edward.
Oh, God!
So all I need to say is that, and everybody at home who's seen that is like, fuck you!
God.
Fuck you! Why did you bring that up?
You want to talk about being punched right in your fucking heart.
That's some fucked up shit.
God.
But what it does is, on the side of that, like, all this horrible shit's going on, but when Ed gets mad about being called short, he still goes into, like, chibi arms, spaghetti arms, wailing, like, freaking out, like, I'm the older brother! And it's, the weight of the story is not lost because it cuts away to raw emotion. And that's something that chibi can show you really well, is anger and sadness and like free, and it is used to punctuate emotion, and it's something that I think we see too much of in Western culture, is the same tone throughout the entire story. Like, if this is a serious story about bank robberies, same tone through the whole story.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of times we forget to add the levity and the like cutaways to jokiness that occurs in real life. Like, you don't just feel the same emotion for the whole time.
Coen Brothers.
Yes, they do it masterfully.
Yes.
Sometimes life is horrible, and sometimes you feed your coworkers into a wood chipper, and that's just kind of fucking funny, even though it has no good right to be funny.
No, it doesn't.
And I think that is important, and I think that it's something that we see too often in Western stuff, is like the whole grimdark, gritty, like over, like, this is a story for adults, which means it's not funny.
Well, I think we make that mistake more right now.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that's
why 80s action movies rock.
Yeah.
It's like, shit's blowing up.
We don't fucking care.
But it's hilarious.
And there's
Tango
a boob.
and Cash. Oh, yeah.
And there's boobs.
There's a boob for no reason. Literally no reason.
You have to have that boob there.
It is
required.
It's required in the 1980s, early 90s law of action movies, and that they cannot be a main character's boob. That is background boob.
No, it's got to be.
And why is it there?
Stunt boob.
Because
stunt boob. Bring on the stunt boob.
And sometimes you have three boobs on one person.
Yes.
And that's the best time.
And on that note, executive decision, we are moving on to recommendations.
I agree.
Can I go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so...
No! Go, God, why did I interrupt you? Fuck!
Let him go! Hurry, you're gonna die in here!
Speaking of grim and gritty
I've already
and
died.
like serious emotion times,
yes. Holy
I have brought a book that I have actually been bringing for weeks and not pitching. I've actually been meaning to pitch this book for over a year, and just for one reason or another, I have not ever gotten to it. So I'm pitching Shooters by Eric Troutman, Brandon Jerwa, and Steve Leiber.
Yes.
And this book came out from Vertigo like a couple of years ago. Got some big press. I think it won an award.
It did
It was
win an
definitely
award.
nominated.
Yeah,
I can't remember
kind of made a
what it
big
won.
splash and then disappeared into the ether.
Yeah.
And this is a story about war. Not going to war, but coming home from war.
Yeah, it's very much a story about soldiers.
Yeah, it's based on a number of true stories that were related from Eric's brother-in-law,
Among other people,
among other people.
but specifically that.
As I was reading it the first time, I was kind of like looking for like, how does this relate to the people that I know? And it really, like, it is a fictional story. It's based on true events, but it's not like any one person's story. And what it is, it's this guy. He's a soldier in Iraq, and his entire unit gets wiped out by friendly fire, and he is like badly, badly injured. And so he gets sent home. And he's in physical therapy, and he's got all this like post-traumatic stress, and his marriage is falling apart, and all of this shit is going wrong in his life. And it's about the things that he does in reaction to that, and it's very much the story of a lot of people who have come home from both Iraq and Afghanistan, and the things that they've had to deal with, and the way in which that they cope with their problems in a system that is not really set up to help them cope with those things or support them in the way that they need. It's a very moving story. It's a very well-written story.
Art's amazing.
I said to somebody at the time when I first read it that I think that it will stand as one of the defining documents of what it was like to have been there.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that it's incredibly true, which is something that is hard to do on a subject that's this close and this immediate. That, you know, we were still in Iraq when this was written. We still have soldiers in Afghanistan now. And I think it's something that everybody should read. Certainly every American. I mean, I know we have listeners out there who aren't from America, and so maybe the story won't hit in quite the same way.
Well, no, I definitely
everyone
think.
should read it.
Yeah, I agree.
I think you'll get different stuff out of it based if you're American or not. But I think that it's still an important look at a culture that exists, which is in America we have this generation of people that went to go fight this war, and then the war didn't really end, both in that there is still conflict in the Middle East, and also these soldiers like don't get a nice end cap to the end of the story. There's not like a victory day and a big parade when they came home. Like, they still kind of have to live with this. Like,
absolutely.
It didn't end for them. And friends of mine who went and came back, and acquaintances who I met since then, talk about that change a lot, like what it means to be back now. And I think it's important. I think that if you want to kind of like know what went on, and specifically my generation, when everybody left, because I'm very slightly younger than the first people who went in.
How old are you?
I'm 28, or 27. I turned 28.
So, technically speaking, based on the newest arguments amongst the people who care about these things, Joe is Generation X. The rest of us are considered millennials. Tobiah and I being on the kind of the extreme edge of the beginning, and you guys, because you're 20, late 20s?
No.
He just turned 30.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you join me and Tobiah as being
I'm middle-aged for my family. I'm middle-aged for my family.
So you're on the extreme edge of the millennials, and then you're with us.
Yeah.
Kind of more in the prime real estate of it.
The war started in, 2003?
Well,
I believe was when the invasion of Iraq was.
Afghanistan was 2000.
That was 2001. We were there by, November.
My friend who got...
I was, between 18 and 20 when those wars were starting up.
Yeah. I have my friend who was, one of the first people into Iraq is, I think, 5 years older than I am.
But
So
the point is
Yeah.
that that war went on for 10 years.
Yeah.
So by the end of it, 18-year-olds who were being drummed up to service, who were signing up, were in like second, third grade when the war started. Like, we have a generation of soldiers who were in elementary school when the war that they were fighting in began.
Yeah.
That's true.
And that has a very profound effect on a society.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think that it's an incredibly important work to read, and I think it's important to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk about it.
Brent, what'd you bring?
I'm not going to pitch what I brought because I can't savage my childhood that much. So instead, I want to pitch again Queen and Country Volume 1.
Ooh, it just got given away for free recently.
It
Or
was,
for $1.
It was 49 cents
That's what it
online for a digital copy.
I was close.
Yeah.
Is that still going on?
Somewhere between free and $1.
I think that ended the week before we recorded this.
Oh, okay.
So,
But recently was given away for very cheap, so a lot of people may own that one.
yeah. I'm a big political intrigue person. I'm a big Greg Rucka person. I'm a big Tara Chase person. So it pretty much I used to buy a lot of comics because I worked in a comic store, but there were only certain series that I've deemed were necessary or worthy to keep perpetual physical copies of. And this is true in all media, but Queen and Country is actually the only series that I am actually investing in the hardcovers for. I like it that much. So it's not
You're
for
not
everybody.
holding out for the one volume omnibus that's 8,000 pages long.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be kind of interesting.
Well,
with,
you
the,
know,
with the
certainly-
text novels in there too.
Yeah,
it's just
that,
like it's
that would be pretty
4.5
intense.
A compendium.
feet thick.
Certainly if you like that kind of political thriller, like Jason Bourne, lesser James Bond, like,
Yeah.
if you like those kinds of stories, Queen and Country will not do you wrong.
Well, it's
More realistic than
Yeah.
even Bourne.
it is kind of the quintessential spy comic, I would say. I would say only now is someone trying to write a spy comic that is like similarly realistic.
And weirdly, they have cast Ellen Page as Tara Chase in the upcoming Queen and Country movie,
Yeah.
which just, it feels weird to me.
You
Yeah,
could
we'll have to
say
see.
weirdly they have cast and put anyone after that, and that's what I feel like is happening all the time now for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I'm
you
out
never
of
know.
touch now, apparently. No, it's a fantastic series. It's cool. It includes both novels and comics. It has a rotating number of artists that have contributed to that, but it's all written by Greg Rucka, including the novels. Fantastic stuff. If you want a good reading list of it, there's one online that Chris Niesman of Around Comics like kind of compiled and was like his recommended reading order because that was his favorite comic series. And so it has like the declassifieds and like where
Right,
the
where to
novels
put them
fall
in
and like
and-
when to read certain stuff.
Yeah.
Because it covers a lot of ground. So
Right.
there are some like flashback, flash forward.
Right, the declassifieds are basically flashbacks. The novels
Right.
happen in between the
Right.
fifth or the sixth and seventh and the eighth
Right.
and ninth volumes of the series. Yeah,
So I'll see if I can dig up that reading list because I think I wrote it down when I was listening to a lot of Around Comics, and I may just post it with that recommendation. It's just like a cool recommended reading list
cool.
for that because that is kind of a complicated series.
Cade, what did you bring?
Okay, so I actually wrote down my pitch because I am notoriously bad at pitching books, and Brian on Facebook gave me this great list, and I haven't been doing it justice. So, my pitch this week is Avengers Prime by Brian Michael Bendis, Alan Davis, and Javier Rodriguez. And this is in the aftermath of Siege and Norman Osborn's Hammer and the Dark Avengers, Dark Reign stuff. Captain America is now in charge of the U.S. security, and Thor and Tony Stark and he have all kind of had a falling out due to the events of those books. And so this book starts off with them kind of butting heads, and then they each get thrown into a different part of the Nine Realms and have to figure out how to get home. And it's, and so it's about like learning stuff and trying to come to grips with what has happened, what needs to happen for the future, that kind of stuff. And it's pretty good.
Cool. Sounds like a cool like end cap to all that stuff. And I'm kind of sad that I never read that because I read like everything else Avengers up to that point and then was like, all right, I guess I've read all of the Avengers there.
Yeah, the Dark Avengers era is probably one of my favorite like continuity periods in comics because just I don't know what it was, but a lot of folks were coming up with really interesting ideas around this very central theme that Marvel let kind of run rampant for a pretty long time. And yes, it led to some things that I know people are always opinionated about. Well, I mean, during that period, like One More Day happened.
There's always going to be problematic elements surrounding an event.
But something about letting Norman Osborn basically kind of be
so cool.
cock of the walk is just kind of an amazing premise.
That was kind of the end of the Joe Quesada tenure as editor-in-chief, yeah?
He was the editor still through the Heroic Age, which is what happened.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. There was Heroic Age and Fear Itself.
Right.
And Quesada was still there for Fear Itself, which
I think so, yeah.
And I love Fear Itself.
This book was actually the bridge between Siege and Heroic Age.
Right, yeah. I think that he left right before Inhumanity.
Yeah, that
era.
Sounds right.
Axel Alonso took over in I think 2010.
That may be when like
11,
some of
I thought.
The all new. Once again, View from the Gutters with all the facts and info. You can have just look at fucking the Wikipedia. It's a thing.
We're not Wikipedia.
What do you think I keep doing?
Cage, is there anything else that you wanted to say about Avengers Prime? Other than that, I'm very disappointed that it's not about Optimus Prime as an Avenger. With Thor's
being
hammer.
driven around by Captain America.
Dating this episode.
Damn it. Okay, I'm changing my recommendation to Tobias Panshin's Optimus Prime Avengers.
Yeah.
Get artists to start drawing all of these books that I'm pitching.
I will get some very talented 6-year-olds to crayon draw all of your ideas for you.
Deal.
Axel Alonso became editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics in January of 2011.
That's what I said.
11. That is 2 1s next to each other.
Thank you, Joe, for the math insight on this episode.
This episode
He's our
is
resident
brought to you by
mathematician.
the
And that
number
was
11.
you've wasted your recommendation on telling us what basic Sesame Street.
Yeah, Joe, what do you want to read?
The part of my brain that deals with that was boiled away while I was waiting for you.
So all of your brain was boiled away.
I was going to bring something, but I'm not going to bring it. I'm not going to pitch it. I'm going to pitch something else, something I've been meaning to pitch for a while. And I think it's a very Joe pick. It's a book called What I Did by Jason, who is a Norwegian artist that goes only by his first name.
I thought you were going to say by Jason Voorhees.
By Jason Voorhees. It's the touching story of a boy and his mother.
At Camp Crystal Lake.
Camp Crystal Lake. No, so what I did is a collection of 3 shorter stories.
Cool.
2 of which are mostly silent. There's no dialogue. There's a story of from his childhood. I can't remember what the middle story is, but the last story in it is a retelling of The Iron Wagon, which is a novel, a Norwegian mystery novel, and it's basically a retelling of that, and it does actually have dialogue, a fair amount of dialogue for a Jason story who's released several collections of silent comics. And it's really, I love his style is incredibly clean. His artwork is all anthropomorphized animals. And I just find it really kind of refreshing. The stories, they have, I think, a real emotional impact. And I love reading silent comics because it forces you into the story. You have to really, I think it's very easy to read something like Seconds where you could have just breezed through it real quick and not really absorbed any of it. Where I think with silent comics,
Well, to get anything out of it at all,
you have
You
to
must force
you have to
yourself into
yeah
this.
you have to at least pay attention to what's going on in the panel.
And
so
you have to read the things on the side of the bus.
you do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There are no buses in this comic, though, I'm pretty sure.
I'm
So
not voting for that anymore.
wow, shit! I didn't realize the
If you
bus.
go back through, listen to all my picks, I always
have a
vote.
bus.
It's always got a bus.
That's
in it.
true. But I actually picked it up on a recommendation from from Casey, is one of the guys that runs one of the local comic stores
Danger
in the
Room.
downtown.
And he used
the
to be my
Danger Room.
boss
Yes.
And he used to be Brandt's boss.
Where was that?
at Evergreen.
And
I was
I-
an RA there. He was the
I didn't know that.
assistant resident director.
He
or
was.
some such thing.
I bought it without ever having knowledge of Jason, and I really liked it, and so I bought several of his other books, and I like them all. And so yeah, I've been meaning to bring it for a while. And
Does his name have an umlaut?
It does
I
not.
did.
It
Damn
does
it.
not. What I did,
There goes my vote.
and
Buses and umlauts. Who knew? Jeez, guys.
yes, it's by Fantagraphics Books,
cool.
and it's good. It's good.
the local,
good, like
the
a
local
tummy rub.
publisher, Fantagraph.
So,
Yeah.
Chard, what image book are you pitching this week?
How did you know I was bringing an image book?
I don't know.
Is
It
it possible
was just
that
a
it's
wild
week
guess.
something of my 52 weeks of image? 'Cause,
Well, it might have been week 5 last week, so I'm guessing it might be week 6?
you
Question
know,
mark.
I have no idea.
Can we say it's week 40?
Yeah, it's week 51. This is my second to last image. No,
Hey, look, here's how you make this easy on yourself. Walking Dead number 1. Walking Dead number 2. Walking Dead number 3.
if only I had read
Walking
all
Dead
of
number
those.
3 is where I quit the podcast, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying.
Okay,
He just
so
pitches them. We don't read them.
yeah.
It's fair.
It's very true. This is an image book that I'm surprised I've never brought before because I really, really like this, and it's a book from a while back, and I read it, right when I was getting back into comics, because there was a lot of press about it, and then nothing ever really happened with it. I think there's 2.5 stories. Like, I don't even know that it ever got finished. And this is a serialized set of miniseries by B. Claymore about a private investigator who lives in Hawaii, and it's called Hawaiian Dick. I love Hawaiian Dick.
Oh, shit.
And it is, it's set in the 50s. This is a private investigator in the style of many private investigators written about in the 50s and 60s that are soldiers returned home from war. This is Spencer, Robert B. Parker was like that. I believe Marlowe was like that, and Easy Rollins was definitely that.
Easy Rollins
And
definitely was.
So there was kind of a theme, is like these soldiers would come home and they didn't like following orders, so they didn't want to go get on the cops. They wanted to kind of do their own thing, and so they became these hard-boiled detectives or whatever. And so the Hawaiian Dick is a story of a detective similar to that, cut from the same cloth. This two-fisted, man of action that
In a Hawaiian shirt.
In a Hawaiian shirt, solving mysteries and murders on the island of Hawaii.
Question. Is a Hawaiian shirt like a DVD?
It is.
It
Do I
is.
say that weird too?
Yeah, you put the emphasis on Hawaiian. A Hawaiian shirt?
That's where it goes.
No.
Anyways,
We are not here to talk about how I
We're
say words.
not-
I say them just like any other regular person.
regular person. Regular person.
The twist, the Shamhammer Shamalam twist in this one is that there are the
Took you a minute.
Brandt's laughing, so I
Shamhammer.
lost it. I was on a roll. The twist is that they're dealing with a lot of Hawaiian supernatural elements from this. So there's magic, there's ghosts, there's spirits that the tiki plays into it. There's not only gangsters, there's also there's some mysticism, some supernatural elements going on to these stories as well. And I am a big fan of when you mix crime fiction with supernatural fantasy type stuff.
Never have guessed that.
Fair.
Yeah, surprise, surprise.
Yeah, I mean, we've never talked about that
I think
before.
I've pitched at least 5 to 10 books that are similar to that. But what really stands out in my mind about this series is the art is unlike anything you've ever seen, and I mean that in a good way. It's very, brushy and watercolory in its colors.
Is it anything like Mind MGMT?
No. Not at all. Like,
Mind
literally, I think this
management?
colorist, and I love the colorist, but I think that literally he was like, has anyone in the world colored like this? No? Okay. Let's put a lot of paint on the page. Like, there's a lot... Mind management tended to have this watercolor feel, which is, like, there's not highlights, you know? It's watercolor, and then each section kind of has its own flat tones, and they sort of blend together, and that's the watercolor feel of it. This is, like... feels more like oil painting in a weird way. It's like digital oil painting, but abstract, where there's like layers of paint on top of one another to create highlight, but they're very often kind of what you would consider, I think, like contrasting colors to create like this very strange.
You're gonna have to see this.
Yeah, it's really cool. Everyone should go take a look at it. And
If you guys can't tell, Chard could actually do an hour show about every book we talk about, just talking about the colors.
Yeah.
I love color.
So that's
important.
I
It's
agree.
a
It's
big part
important.
of comics.
I love your passion about color, but
like it.
I also want to vote and go home.
Yeah, let's do it. So everybody check that book out.
Can we talk more about the brushwork on Hawaii?
Yes.
Can I throw this micro? Brant, don't make
the
me do that to you.
saturation
I
on
get
the
to see you
colors
so
is
rarely. I
very
don't want to have to
strong.
threaten your life.
I find the use of harmony
And you
tones.
All
to
right,
be
Bob Ross.
outstanding.
Can I vote?
Yes, please
do
do.
Okay, well, I was going to vote for the other book that Brant didn't pitch that he was flipping
I
through
was
before his
too.
pitch. But
didn't
I'm
even
still
get to
going to
see
vote
it.
for Brant's book, even though he pulled an audible. So my vote is for Queen and Country.
Yes, you've brought that before.
I pitched it once.
Yes,
And I pitched it once, actually.
yes.
And I pitched it nonce.
Me.
Brant, what are you voting
also?
for?
Hawaiian Dick.
Nunce
Yeah.
actually is a word.
Shooters, I love that book.
Yes.
It made me cry the last
Yes.
time I read it. And I think
me
you
too.
would get really angry political science rants out of me during this session, especially with this
That's
heat.
what we want.
Yeah,
No.
I'm sure that's what everybody wants on this fucking show. So, Hawaiian Dick, because I actually started it, was like, this is the most amazing series ever, and then never finished it, so I gotta finish it.
I feel like the B. Claymore kind of did the same thing, unfortunately. So there's the Hawaiian Dick, the first trade is the one I'm pitching. There's a second trade, and then I think there's 2 or 3 issues from the third trade that I don't know if it ever got collected.
Yep.
Because I don't know if it ever finished.
Cade,
Cadamus.
what are you voting for?
Well, first off, I want to say fuck you guys and bring every single one of these books back.
We will.
It only took
No.
me like 2 years to
Never
pitch
again.
Shooters, so
I'm
I'm sure I'll
picking
get back to it
Shooters.
again.
All right.
But I want to read every single one of these.
You can still read them.
Well, okay, I want to read and talk about
God,
every
I don't
single
want to
one
have
of
to
them.
cast the choosing. So I fucking. All right, I am not going to vote for Shooters. Not because I don't want to have a discussion about it, but because we are all friends with Eric Troutman, who wrote it, and I desperately want to have a conversation about it with him that we can put on air before we talk about it. Because
That's weird. I want to
think-
do it the other way.
Well, or either
we've
way,
been talking
like,
about trying to get him to be on the
I
show and talk
desperately
about
want
it.
to.
And the reason that I haven't pitched it for over a year was
we've been
because we were
trying-
going to get him on,
Yeah.
and that hasn't happened.
We actually
So
started
I pulled the
planning
trigger.
that over a year
and
ago.
so
He's a very busy man.
he is a busy man, and there's
I
been
don't,
a lot of
I don't
stuff.
want that to seem like a
Also-
reflection on him in any way. Like,
No.
he's a busy man.
He's
he
had
has
a
things
lot
to
of shit
do, and
going
talking
on.
to us isn't necessarily
He doesn't-
ever going to be on the top
He
of
doesn't
his
really
list.
like you guys.
Oh yeah,
I mean, he used to be my boss, and he just nothing but bad things to say about you guys.
He is
to
a
be honest.
bitter,
I
bitter
You're
never
right. He
even
has
met
had
him.
nothing but bad things to say about you, Chard.
Yeah,
That's
and
true.
Wait.
to be honest, and everyone else. But
Not
But
me.
To be
He
perfectly
loves me,
honest, I
I
think
think.
that we have to talk about the book, and at that point, he may consider actually talking to us.
which
about it.
also,
is-
I would
Because
love
he'll despise
because he'll
what we
have to
said
just
about it.
yell at
Because
us.
he, will have to yell at us about how we completely misunderstood all of his
Yeah.
ideas.
And I would
I love you, Eric. Please don't hurt me.
I would love to get Brandon Cuddles Jerwa on the show as well.
Yeah, I would love to get the two of them on. I would love to have a conversation with them about Shooters because
But you
there's
can
a lot of it
listen-
that resonates with me.
You can listen to Jerwa on his own podcast.
Yes.
BJ Shea Nation.
Geek Nation.
Geek Nation. That's what it is.
So I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote for Hawaiian Dick.
For the record,
I can't vote for what I was going to vote for
Because it'll make a tie.
because it will make a tie.
Well,
which
how about this?
was-
If you vote for the thing that makes it a tie, then we just make Cade revote
What?
to break the tie. No, serious. Like it's the double elimination thing. So his thing's been cut out, and then he'd have to vote.
He gets another vote.
Yeah.
That's a more interesting
That
way of
is-
doing things. We
but
have to
is-
consider that.
What Chard is going to vote for is the thing that Cade voted for, which would.
Wait.
I was going to vote for.
Or were you going to vote for? Queen
I
and Country?
completely- yes, but because I've never read it.
Uh-huh.
But instead, I'm going to vote for Avengers Prime because I've never read that either, and I would very much enjoy to read that. So
All right.
Okay.
Well, looks like we're reading Hawaiian Dick.
So next time, Hawaiian Dick, Volume
Yes.
1.
Next time we give you some good Hawaiian Dick.
yeah. Oh, and bonus: if you buy the trade of Hawaiian Dick, in the back there is a cocktails recipe section.
Nice.
So I recommend making some cocktails and reading that.
But not so many cocktails that the colors on the page move or anything weird.
Oh, definitely
So
that
what
many.
you're saying is that they should get drunk and absorb some Hawaiian Dick.
Yes.
Yes.
Wait.
But no, they should go out and get some Hawaiian Dick, then get good and drunk, and then get really familiar with Hawaiian Dick.
Okay.
Also,
Good night, everybody.
Eat some spam while you read this.
Yes, true.
For my Hawaiian friends.
We love you.
Yeah, love you guys.
Podcast over.
Goodbye. Canceled.
Podcast canceled.
Thank you for listening to View from the Gutters. I hope our recommendations have inspired you to go out and find some new comics you'll enjoy. Join us next time for a discussion of our selected title, but like every week, we encourage you to read all of the recommended books. In the meantime, please leave us an iTunes review. It really does help new listeners find the show. You can also like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at ViewFRTHGutters. Feel free to email us at contact@viewfromthegutters.com. Please send us any questions, comments, or recommendations you might have. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as we post new videos every week. And thanks again for listening. And as always, keep reading.